Meantime, consumers keep getting prodded. First it was eggs. Now cattle prices are hitting a record high. Pippa Stevens is here with more. Pippa, I imagine this means our beef prices? And so forth?
Exactly. So it's all going up. And basically, cattle prices are hovering around their January all-time high, making consumer steaks a little bit more expensive. Beef prices are now outpacing overall inflation, with January CPI report showing a 5.5% rise year over year compared to 3% headline inflation. And for the time being, consumers are not pushing back, spending a record $160 billion on beef products last year, even as prices hit $8 per pound. But cattle ranchers cannot just increase supply when prices rise. Last year, beef cow inventory in the U.S. stood at roughly 28 million head. That's the smallest herd since the 1960s. Ranchers have been reluctant to rebuild herds following years of depressed prices, expensive feed, high rates, and unpredictable weather. Alton Callow from Steiner Consulting told me that while prices will be volatile, the trend between now and 2026 is higher, since there is a very long lag time as well as a disconnect between futures prices and retail prices, since it does take a while for higher producer costs to trickle down. So, if you're going to be ordering the steak anytime soon, it's going to cost you more.
So how much of the steak is also imported? I mean, is that going to get affected by tariffs, and then, the prices here will stay high because now you can actually raise prices?
So that's another big outstanding question. We get about 6% of our cattle supply from Canada and Mexico. And so for the time being, the people I've spoken to said that we probably won't see an immediate impact from tariffs simply because these trade relationships have developed over decades. And so if you're, for example, a farmer in Mexico and you've always sold to processors or feedlots in Texas, you don't necessarily have anywhere else to send your cows. And so for the time being, you might say, okay, it's worth it for me to absorb that cost rather than have the feedlot pay a higher price because there's nowhere else to go. But longer term, that eventually starts to get trickled down to consumers.
Do you know offhand, Pippa, what's going on with chicken prices? Because here's what I find strange. Egg prices are constantly high. They're a problem. It's abnormal. But then you go get chicken, and I'm like, okay, it's a little high, but it's not as bad as it was during the pandemic. Doesn't it come from the same bird, especially if there's a trade-down effect happening with beef now as well?
Yeah, you always have to look at the different types of meat we're talking about and where consumer preferences stand. There's also, in the cattle industry, there's restocking your herds, similar phenomenon in the chicken and the avian industry. And so right now, of course, we saw that mass culling thanks to the bird flu, and that's what's really driving up those prices of eggs. But chicken has always been kind of a trade-down meat, and so the prices have traditionally been pretty depressed. But particularly now, when you see egg and beef prices rising, then we could start to see momentum shifting to chicken.
All right. Not what the consumer wants right now. Not at all. Pippa, thanks. Pippa Stevens.